Tish, Hawa, Deutschen. Mahalo for being here right now. This is a big crowd. It's my honor to moderate this session today about language work. There's a great healing that goes on when people are doing language work. Healing from the tragic violence perpetrated by my people onto your people. Tragic means unnecessary wrong. It was not necessary, but we did it. I give my apology for whatever it's worth for this wrong. I'm sorry. We're still doing wrong. You know it. I need to ask if anybody saw that movie, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Okay, there was a sequel where they made the baby great big. What's the name of that movie? Honey, I Blew Up the Baby, maybe. Okay, giant baby. Giant babies walking around. I've heard so many people say, Hakustiyi. We know what to do. We have thousands of years. We know what to do. I started to write down the names of the people who would say that so I could cite them, but too many people are saying it. You know what to do. So my suggestion, my hope is that you will not follow the big baby who has only 200 years, 300 years on this land and doesn't know what to do, is arrogant, ignorant, and greedy. The big baby's about 2 years old. That's what my people have to offer. So it's a conundrum that I'm standing here today to moderate this session. We're here to hear about turning the tide in this region. How many saw the battles of fire and water? A goodly portion of people here. In there, the Unungan man challenges Kassy to turn back the tide of the white invaders. He challenges him to go down to the water and turn the tide with his power. And he uses turning the tide as a metaphor for the impossible. And you know what? All over this planet, small language communities are turning the tide from language ebb to language flood. They find they have the power to turn the tide. There's a transformative energy in this movement of language revitalization, renovation, maintenance. My job as moderator today is to keep the time, so I'll try to do that. We'll have about an hour, so until about 11 for mentor apprentice. Then we'll have about half an hour for Zeush, and about half an hour for project updates for language work. I want time for questions. Are there people here who would want to ask questions? We'll see. In the first part, the mentor apprentice, Nora and Dick are marked on the schedule, but that's an error on my part. So first we'll have Guneochi and team from Klukwan talk about their experiences with mentor-apprentice. Mentor-apprentice is a model. It's a possible way for intergenerational language transmission that's not in a classroom setting. The model is to have two people, ideally a birth speaker and an avid adult learner. They meet together several hours every single day, and they carry on their life in the language. There are many variations on this model, as you'll hear from these people today. There are many mentor-apprentice teams working in this region on the three languages. We have two examples for you today.
Gunilchish Hatwasigu Gunilchish Yagawis Gwalsha Yiin Gachtunik Hayuk Tangi dot Yeji Tune Tlakwan Dach Owe Ye Hayati Ya Nachen Yitini Ayati Ha Tunagu Yisawe has only has accounts in Ya Nachen Leikag Enach Yedoasak Ya Nachen the healing robe. This robe was started by a group of women from one of our village members, Lonnie Hotch and Ruth Casco, Edith Jocko, Adrian Bocart, and there's a group of us. Some of us began when this robe first started with them, but those were the main core team that finished this robe. It took them several years. And this robe was to signify our journey down towards healing, that in order to continue on and to bring, we had to lay down the past hurts. And so our tribal council uses a portion of this robe as the logo. And I know some of the spellers we can see, but and as we are embracing, we begin this journey together. It's a journey that our elders just did it naturally. It wasn't like they had to think about it. It was their way of life. And as Alice stood before us, Gunilchish Kunach, and as she apologized, as you all know, but as we begin this journey, what we're doing is putting landmarks for the next generations and helping them to see those landmarks that's been there for centuries. This is a photo of our council, and as you can see, the robe sits in the council room, and each time they meet, it's there. And they also begin every meeting with prayer, and they end with prayer. And we believe that is where our source is. And Hayuk atangi ka ade yeha kusti yeti kunach hatlatsini owe katsu ha itria yahas anagut has ha itriag Hastutlatsiniawe. In order to begin down this journey, we had to do a strategic plan. And excuse me, but my mind has kind of gone blank. Does anybody remember what year we did the strategic plan? And we did this strategic plan with community members, and in about 6 years, and as you can see, in 5 to 10 years, how do you view your community? And we really thought about it, and language and culture was one of the upfront things that we wanted to see back. And pretty much most of everything several years ago, as we did that strategic plan, except for our cultural center, we have done, and we're conducting another strategic plan, which we've just gotten done with. And our Tlingit Tlingit Language and Culture program, we got funded from Department of Education under the Alaska Native Education Program. And here, just a little back history. The language was taught in the 80s by elders Margaret Stevens, Evelyn Hotch, and Joe Hotch. They've all gone in different times, along with Lonnie Hotch. And I came on in '98, and I could not teach the language. I had to go through something in my heart, and knowing I hadn't taught my children, I had to go back and talk to them and teach them. And we got our grants, an A&A grant, a Department of Ed grant. And our goals was to teach the language and culture in the school and community. As you can see, we've done it through song and dance and university classes, evening classes, and we've had culture days where we just combined everything, carving, weaving, and everybody got to experience a little bit of culture from the community, invited the community. And there are some pictures of our youth in the classroom, taking them out into harvesting. And that's a poster made by one of the teachers. We had Elizabeth come. This is some of our summer bilingual camp, and we planted Maria potatoes, Tlingit potatoes, and the kids got to see that, and it also introduced them to Tlingit history. Our summer bilingual camp, there you have them cutting fish. The lady that's in the checkered shirt, that's our president, Kimberly Strong. And the lady in the red coat, that's the certified teacher we brought on board to work with us, and so to fill that gap in the school. More of our summer. And there's our language team. As you can see, some of us are here. Behind me is Christopher Hotch. Let's see, we can start from this side, the back. Lonnie Hotch, Lorraine Casco, she's sitting back there. Charlene Kassy, Gusuhu. Evelyn Hotch, she's here with us. Christopher Hotch is an apprentice. The next one, Kimberly Strong. She's been involved in the language learning. And Victor Hotch, my son. And there I am, Margaret Stevens, Sally Berrettine, and our elder, and our historian, Joe Hotch, our other elder, Smith Kassy, and Alex Strong, who's I had asked some of them to share with you because I can't speak for them. I want them to share their experience as we began this journey down together with the Master Apprentice program. And it's been a learning curve for us, and it's been exciting. So, is that mic on?
Uh-oh, my stomach's growling. Gunal cheese on yet osani. Ya ye cook ha darin ye ad. Ya hakosti kahayu katanke. Ade ha ikhkodet likeya. Aya achtawasi kuada kaktatane. Chayegawat. Shikwanach. Skuk ikatu tanke Tlingit Language usa inawat us khatut. Utlitsi. Qanayda khatsakha akh kachakanda. Aqqa yaqad kaska. Tlingit Language qatanga jawa. The teacher chkanda uti. Ya qasiat qanakh utlitik ya pipe. A cook lut yanuduati, a hutlit ate hayu do a g aya hayu katanke. Kayate ka tawak tacha ach ya yashawatish katlik the tie you do a g school, Tlingit Language katanke. A jawa tilta to CEO or two where you katank. So yan the jeka. Achaya Hatlatinea Hayukatangi Akhilk Ekadeusekha Iyukatangi Yakilakade Ekosti Okekati Achaya Yitat Yahayat Kehatachan Kayan Kayat let Kaksiti Atso Asyasayanat Natliye Yakaktu Art Natliye Yakaktu Art Ushtin khaisteye ya tikati awa akhtuwatli ye khachi naska ye khade wach qoganade yeti ayu qatan ke Tlingit khasate ya Tlingit Language qatutange qa okhek qati yeti qati uchin qaqtul shat yan qatu ate. I really appreciate our language. We cannot get a long ways without our language. My grandmother told me, if you forget your language, your life is going to disappear on you. It's very important. It's very important. I recall when we spoke our own Tlingit language in school, they washed our tongue, the teacher washed our tongue with soap. And that soap didn't taste very good. It wasn't like hooligan oil or anything like that. It was terrible. And the one in Ketchikan, somebody told it from there at a convention, and they said another boy, native boy, talked in his own Tlingit language. And the teacher took him outside to a frozen pipe and put his tongue on that pipe, and his tongue froze to the pipe. The only way they got it out was put hot water on it. We were discouraged in many ways. And the other one, the lady from Tlawak, said her mother really was hurt in many ways for speaking her Tlingit language. So she didn't want her children to go through the same suffering. So she didn't teach her children. This is the way we were discouraged. We were highly discouraged. There's no cure. We are the only ones that can cure those hurt areas. And we should not hold it against our non-native people. Let's work with them and let them know. I go to the school in Tlakwan. We have about 20% non-natives, and they're teaching and learning our Tlingit language. So we're going to go a long ways. When those non-native children go to other states, they're going to start telling what they learned in our village. It's not only Tlakwan village. Each of your village is going to be heard. So I said that there's 3 different ways that our Tlingit people, was it the SOK? Which one have you got to lead? But we have 3 different ways that our people speak, even though it's the same, but the sound is a little bit different, and I don't want us to lose that. If we stick to one language, we're going to lose 2 other languages that speak their own. And at Tlakwan, we always point that out, that somebody else, like it's, when we're in Tlakwan, we say, "Akaskewo." And here in Juno and Taku, Douglas, they say, "Akaskew." Akaskew, you see the difference? Dialect, yeah. Well, so it's important that we continue. And I don't like to use the word revival of our language. Let's say we retain. Let us retain it, not revive it. That's where I'm at. And we make sure when we're talking at the school that we mention drug and alcohol and smoking cigarettes is harmful to your body and your mind. And the important part that we see is we need to teach our children as soon as they're born. I heard in Ketchikan Convention, one of our native teachers said, from age day 1 to age 5, a child learns 75% of what he or she will learn throughout the whole life. So that's why we really need to cuddle up to our children. When I went to school, my grandparents had a special word, my parents also. They said, "You're going to school in Tlingit. School good." They never said you're going to school for yourself. Not to me. They said you're going to school to help your people. And when I help the people, I'm also helping myself. I think I better cut off right there.
Our time is kind of getting really close, but I wanted some of the apprentices to share their experience. Joanne Elsie Spud is back here. This is Joe and Evelyn's daughter, and also her children are learning. This is her son, Christopher, behind me. So, Gook, whatever.
Here.
My Tlingit name is Kaude. I started learning the language when my daughter started kindergarten. She got to probably about September, end of September, and she already knew as much as I did in my adult life. I won't tell you how old I was when she was born, but that just didn't feel good to me to have her know as much as me and already getting into things that I didn't know. And so I start looking through some books, and I'd call my mom and say some of the things to her, and it just wasn't enough. It was wanting more, and pretty soon I would ask her, my daughter, things that I wanted to know. And a lot of it, the humor really keeps me going. You know, I make up phrases to say to my daughter to so we could use the language with each other. And I was telling her something about I love her with all my heart or something, but I told her I loved her with all my pitcher. and she was kind enough to not laugh in my face, but she said, huh? So now I still, that word for heart still doesn't register in my brain instantly, but I know what a pitcher is now. And some of the things that are hard when you're trying to learn and raise your family is, you know, all your mind is focused on your job, and then you want to find time to meet with an elder. And I was fortunate enough to be an assistant to Marsha, and a lot of you know when Marsha left Klukwan for a while to come down and go to college for a while, and she got the great idea that I would be the good assistant for my mom, and that was like maybe a year and a half into my learning, and they set me up to be an assistant to my mother, and it was like, I don't think Marty or my mom knows what they're doing. But it really brought me a long ways. My fluency isn't, for speaking it doesn't just flow right out, but now when I hear them talking, I know what they're talking about, and sometimes I could get so much of it that I just have to go and tell somebody that this is what they said. And I remember about 3 years ago, there was a lady that lived in Juneau, and she was up in Haines for the Decot tournament, and one of the elders was in there, and on his way out he stopped by her and he was speaking Tlingit to her, and it was like, what an exciting, proud moment to eavesdrop in a restaurant and then know what they were saying. It was, that's one of my little Tlingit treasures that I'll always remember. So I am the assistant to Marsha in the language program, so I get to spend a lot of time around the language, and then I work with my mother at the museum in Haines, and we do some language there. And what helps me the most is, I guess, helping to teach. That I have to know what I'm talking about before I can tell someone else, so it challenges me to push a little harder. And you know, this thing between the native and non-native world, it's been a struggle within myself to, you know, you go to school and they tell you you need to go to college, you need to do this, and I tried that. I tried so hard, and being away from Klukwan just wasn't going to work, you know. If I thought, well, I'll go to summer school. Well, if I go in the summer, I'm missing all the fishing and all that. If I go in the winter, I'm missing all that stuff. So I just have tons of classes here and there, but being there is the best education. I think that's what God created me for. That's where He created me to be. And to have my parents there is quite a treasure that I could call my dad's house and say some words to him on the phone. And working with Marsha, anybody that is learning with somebody, from somebody that is really gentle with you, makes so much difference. Marsha will tell me, not in front of everybody, maybe later when we're at work, a little mispronunciation, or I could just look at her and she'll know what I want, what I'm trying to say, and she'll let me know. So if you're really struggling and things aren't working for you, maybe you need to try another elder to work with, because we all click with different people, just like we do with our regular classroom teachers. Some of them we think they're great and some of them aren't, and it's find who you connect with and run from there as much as you run to it as much as you can. I have my oldest son back here that I don't know, he kind of just came out of nowhere with his, I didn't have any idea he was interested in the language, and he joined in, and it really works at home to have all 4 of my children interested in the language. And one of them doesn't live at home anymore and just joined the Army, but he doesn't hesitate to call Grandma, Grandpa, or me and use the language with us. And I guess I'll close on this next funny thing, that when I first start learning the language, and we'd go to a ku'ich or something, and people were getting up to talk, and I really wanted to say something, but for some reason nothing could ever come to my mind but tacha chatwasi tach. A mosquito bit me, and it just wasn't ever appropriate for anything else. But that's it's in my head, and the language is in my soul and spirit now. When I was in Anchorage for some reason, and a phrase kept going through my head, and I finally called my mom and I asked her, what does this mean? It just keeps going through my head. And she said, it means I'm lonesome. It's like, whoa, maybe I was feeling that, but I didn't know. I guess that was my first experience with a Tlingit feeling. I didn't know that's, being away from all of them, that was what I was feeling. So, Ganushish, and I hope our interest and our little knowledge of the language will inspire somebody today to step one little step at a time, because my daughter's in 8th grade this year, so that's how long I've been working with the language, and my confidence for speaking is pretty low. My understanding is a little bit higher, so Ganushish.
I've been an apprentice. I'm in my 3rd year of apprenticeship. I didn't really realize how patient the elders were with me until I started working with new learners myself. And how strange it must have been for them to hear me trying to say little words until I heard other people say it, and I couldn't help but laugh. I explained it was like hearing somebody say "but otl," "but bottle," like over and over again, experimenting with all these different ways to say it. So I'm gonna teach for all your guys' patience with my Tlingit speaking. I'm not a very eloquent speaker. I'm very much a learner. I started out with just making lists of words that I wanted. I would just journal and then see which words I used a lot in English and want to learn those words. And then recently I started journaling in Tlingit and just finding the English words that I needed to fill in with and finding those are the words that I need to learn. I my Tlingit makes sense to me, but I don't have the sentence structures down or how to make things past tense or future tense. And Elsie and I can understand each other fairly well, but I think it probably sounds humorous to somebody who's an actual speaker. So I think what helps me most is just not being afraid to make mistakes and understanding people who will let me make my mistakes and then tell me the right way to do it. So that's all I have.
Tlingit yukatangi stu khastu. Gunit yukat duasauk Tlingit khenach. Christopher Hotch yukat duasauk Dleka khenach. I guess one of the best things about this is that I get to work with both of my grandparents, and I think that's pretty unique, and I consider myself pretty lucky to be in this situation. And just being around all of the elders is just a whole different type of atmosphere. There's just so much joy and laughter when we all get together. Let's see, what else is there? Wow. I think I'm going on my second year, and I'm pretty amazed that, like my mother had said, a majority of the stuff I learned, the kids in the school picked all that up just as fast as we did, and I'm pretty proud of them at how far they went in this short period of time. And one of the questions I saw on this thing was why do you do this? Why are you an apprentice? And one of I guess the main thing that stuck out in my mind was do this for our elders and for our kids growing up in the school. Sheesh.
Yeah. We would like to say Gunal Chish, Tlkat Yuhan Hag E Isa Achi. Yitwasiguj Adasa dat ha Ayewoods E Atwutu Adi. You can ask us as we're here in this building together. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure any of our mentors or apprentices would be happy to answer some of those questions. And I just want to say one more thing. In the grassroots effort to communities, and as you begin your journey down and as you obtain grant funds, one of the things that I feel is really important is when the money comes in, you're required to spend it on what you said you're going to spend it. And sometimes not all of us have that kind of knowledge, and it's so important to know a little bit about how grants work, and make sure you have people. If you don't have that, there's lots of training available for people. And so I just want to say that in a quick. And Alice works with us as a linguist, and we're so thankful for her. And some of the things that we've done with this time that we had. Whoops. We made posters. We're still in the learning. We've done videos, recording some of the stories with our elders. And we've also done curriculum. And if you have any questions, again, and we have some of these that you're free to take. I mean, for the posters, but the video, we're still kind of hanging on to those. Gunnach Sheesh.
Gunalchish, Gunelti and them. I'll invite Kuliek and them to come up. How do you keep time on people that are speaking from their heart? Anybody want to do this job? Who can cue me the Tlingit for stand up? Guide and knock. And sit down. Guy ke. Guide and knock. Guy ke. Just so we don't atrophy. Okay, you guys will give your own introduction.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is another mentor-apprentice situation that the team members will describe.
What is she, Tla? How much time do we have, though? Okay, I needed to know when to stop talking because I always talk too much. Ach tuasi gu gunelchish hot I ku khu kuhlek yuchat duasaku kagwan tan shawo ayachat sheet ka dachatiti Cajun jin kat kadachadushu taku akatagu achawa gwas shawachan chatsiti gwasye Goodness, sheesh. The time I have here with you folks is so precious. I want to encourage you. I want to share some of my experiences. And so I'm going to break down and use English, but I do it with regret because we need to hear the language as much as possible. Even from beginners such as myself. We need to hear the language spoken to communicate. And I just wish I could tell you what I want to tell you in Tlingit. One day, it's my goal that I will be able to communicate in the language. For now, Jadiye Khatnayu. Please forgive me. I cannot do what I need to do in Tlingit yet. I want to point out some things that you need to be thinking about if you want to be a master teacher or if you want to be an apprentice language learner. I'm going to start with my experiences. I am from the interior. I grew up on a homestead outside of Fairbanks, and I heard one language my whole childhood life, one language. I didn't know I didn't know what any other language sounded like, and that was a severe handicap to me in my brain growth. I always considered myself to be a little bit mentally handicapped for learning languages because I did not hear more than one language while I was growing up. If somebody tells you, what's the purpose of learning Tlingit? What good is it? And it breaks my heart when someone says that. But I have the answer for you. The answer is, why not? The same good thing happens with any second language. Teach your grandchildren, teach your neighbor, teach the children that are 12 and under the language because their brain is still growing up to age 12 or 13. And when you put another language in their ears, they begin to grow the neurons in their brain that allows them to learn second languages and third languages and fourth languages. It doesn't matter what language is their second language. It just matters that they have a second language. And why not the language of the land? And that's my second answer. Because it's good for the child, it helps him to grow. His brain grows. And because out of respect for living on the land, you should learn the language of the land. When you go to France, they expect you to learn French. When you go to Spain, they expect you to learn Spanish. Whatever language of the land that you are on, you are expected to show respect and use that language, or at least show respect to the language. And that's my message to you folks who, when people argue with you, what's the purpose? There's two very good reasons for doing that. So do not hesitate to put your language into the air. And if someone is sitting in the side listening in on you, that's good. If they don't understand, that's fine. If you have to retranslate for yourself and you're talking to someone, that's okay too, because you are using your language in public. I want to tell you a story about my first language experience. When I married into the Native community, my father-in-law, well, it was all about me. I was still a child. It seems like 20 years old. My father-in-law told me how to say the word for dog. And, well, no, I asked him, how do you say the word for dog? I want to name our puppy. So he said, cake. And I said, cake. And he said, cake. And I said, cake. And he said, that's good. Because when I grew up, I had no second language in my head. I did not have the pathways in my head to even hear sounds that weren't in English. And he recognized that, and he encouraged me. Just like the previous speaker, my first attempts to learning Tlingit were encouraged, even as heavily accented as they were. So let me give you that as a message. Be patient with beginners and say, that's good. Ethel's my apprentice master, or language master teacher, and her dad would do that. If it wasn't quite right, he would always say, that's okay. But the way he said it, you knew that it could be better. But at my time in my development of language, I didn't recognize my father-in-law, what he was really telling me. That's a good try. That's what he was telling me. But I thought I did it right. For 2 years, I thought I was a good language student. And I'd learned, I was playing with the language. There's nothing wrong with playing with the language, but at some point you got to get deadly serious. But when you're starting, it's okay to play. And I learned a word here and a word there, and I didn't know that I didn't know. So when you have a student who's a beginner and they can't hear you, there's nothing that you can do to make them hear. It's a process. It's like a brick wall in your ear, right here. It's like putting your hands over your ears. What you're hearing is muffled in your brain, and your brain filters out the sounds that you've never heard before. In the Tlingit language, there's over half of them are not in English. So no wonder English speakers who've never heard the language as a child have a hard time hearing all of those subtle sounds. So you need to be patient with your apprentices and just get the language into their ears. After a couple of years, all of a sudden I had a Helen Keller day. You know how Helen Keller, she was a wild child and she couldn't hear, she couldn't speak, she couldn't see. She couldn't communicate with the world around her, and her parents got a tutor for her who was going to try to teach her sign language on your hand, and worked with her for years. And then all of a sudden one day, and she'd done this many times, her teacher put her hand under the water pump, 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 and then spelled water. Pump, 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 spelled water. All of a sudden, it dawned on Helen that she was being talked to, that she was missing something here. She was communicating. She was hearing. She was hearing something she didn't know she could hear. And that happened to me one day. And in 1973, I asked the question about the dog. And in 1975, I had a Helen Keller day where I realized that I did not hear that word correctly. It took me 2 years to hear cake. But it was a developmental step, and you can't speed it up very well. You can tell somebody gently, if you have a good relationship, you can tell them, no, you're not hearing it right, listen more carefully. But I can't make someone hear it. They have to find the way to hear it. I'm running out of time. I got 5 more minutes? 10 minutes? Okay. I'm going to give my daughter one of those minutes, hopefully. So at that point, when I realized that I couldn't hear, my self-confidence in what I had learned previous to that totally evaporated. I questioned everything about everything I thought I knew. And at that point, I took a class from Besta Dominic's at Sheldon Jackson in 1976 and trying to learn how to read and write, because at that point I knew I didn't know a lot. And the more I learned, the more I realized that the more I learn, I have that much more that I don't know. So you're going to experience that as well. One real quick thing. You mentor-apprentice conditions. If you're going to begin a relationship with a speaker as an apprentice, or you as a speaker are going to try to take a grandchild under your arm and teach them, you have to have some conditions. You have to mutually trust each other. You have to be able to trust that your partner, language learning partner, is going to look out for you and not put you on the spot in public or privately too much. Challenge is good, but to trust each other, to do the best, to take care of you. You need to help each other mutually. It cannot be a one-way street. If an apprentice wants an elder to teach them, they need to reciprocate. That's what apprentice means. You do something for the master who's teaching you. And the master allows you to do something for them. It's an exchange of respect. And if the master apprentice doesn't want you to do anything for them, it's too one-sided. So you've got to find ways to let that student do something to pay you back for their appreciation. So it has to be mutual. And you have to have a common goal. You both have to understand, we're doing this not because it's fun for one of us. We're doing this because we want to learn the language. We're doing this because we want the language to be handed down. We want the language to stay alive. And you look for as many opportunities in private, in public, in every place you can think of. You have to use the language as much as you can. And I teach the language at Blatchley Middle School, and when I have elders come in my classroom, I am also a student, And what I teach my kids is, if a speaker has something to offer on what we're doing, we stop immediately, right in the middle of a language exercise or lesson or project or game. We stop everything and everybody stops and we listen to what that speaker has to say, because that speaker has more knowledge than I, and we want to learn that knowledge. And that's a way to show respect as well and encourage them to come in and be part of what you're doing. So there's all kinds of apprenticeships. My daughter and I are a couple. We both apprentice under Dastia. Although I've had many mentors in my life, and she probably has another mentor besides my mentor, and I would like to just give you 1 minute. I took 2, but sorry. Okay, talk about your mentors.
Mentors. Shaq u khat du sak kagwantan ay khat. City. My English name is Cassandra Littlefield. My mentors are mainly my mom and also Dastia, but also Sadia, Mary Anderson from Atlin. I really enjoy learning from you two. It means a lot to me.
Any help in the classroom? Mutual exchange, helping each other.
I get to help my mom out in her classroom whenever I'm in town. I'm going to college here in Juneau this year, so I don't get to spend a lot of time with her.
Yeah.
Kulchish.
I want to say that while we're waiting, the reason that I'm dressed this way is because I'm just back from Hawaii, a working vacation. I went to 2 conferences about language documentation and conservation for small language communities. And then I had the privilege of going to the Punanaleo language nest. Language nests are not just for children in Hilo. And if I have a chance, I'll show you some things from that. Would you ask your question?
I wanted to know how you can keep the high school kids interested in language, because they're very good in grade school and elementary and junior high, and then when they get into high school, they kind of lose interest. I know the mentor program is much on the same scale there.
Okay, I see there's one answer. Does anyone else have an answer? Yeah, anyone else? Okay. Kuliek, can you bellow from there?
I can. I taught Tlingit language at Sitka High School for 8 years.
Excuse me, Shirley, can you hear back there? Oh, I beg your pardon. She said, how can you keep the kids by the time they get to high school to retain their interest, even if they go through elementary, middle, junior?
Okay. First of all, when we have our first week of school, it'll be all in English, and I will make sure that each one of them has an opportunity to tell me, the instructor, what they want to know. What do they want to learn? I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So we talk about it through the week, and then at the end of the week, I put on the board what I want them to know. And some way during the year, you will look for ways that you can make that both happen. First of all, it needs to be mutual. They need to know that they're part of the class, that they have half the responsibility in the classroom, and that it's their classroom, and that you're willing to go where they want to go as long as it's in Tlingit. That's the one rule in my high school classroom. I understand why you asked this question. It's the age. It's a hard age. But the high school kids learn language exactly the same way that a baby learns language. They look like adults, but they enjoy playing games just as much as the babies do. You start off small, just like you would with a baby. Use baby language to start them off. And as the year goes on, depending on the teacher's fluency, you grow them. You teach just over their heads, just a little bit, so that they have to stretch a little bit each day or each week. Give them things that they can use at home, that they can use in the community, that they can teach their little brothers or sisters, that they can teach their parents. This will make them feel very self-confident when they know something that they can share back with the next generation.
Kuliek has given you partial answer. You know she's got a lot more to say. So find her. I'm sure there are. And you know who the people are to ask. And at this time I'm going to ask Tej to come up. And you're ready to go. James Crippen is from Wrangell, master's degree student at the University of Hawaii Manoa, and we're luring him home. While we're waiting for the, hardware to catch up with us, I'm going to relate to you some things that I heard in Hawaii. Building a language community takes 3 generations. What they did was first adult teaching, then family teaching. Bear in mind, this information comes from my filter, through my filter. So I encourage you to go for yourself. Having a safe place for parents and children to use the language is important. The excellence of the people is in the language. In the language is the literacy and the science and the math. They all say, believe in yourself. You think about a people strong enough to go under the glaciers are strong enough to do anything. Paddle the Pacific. You can do anything. Here they are, speaking their language, and they say, everybody feels inadequate. They think they're not a speaker. They say, use what language you know. Use what you know. And like Katrina, put in the Tlingit that you know. You define fluency yourself. Don't let anybody else do it for you. And define success for yourself. Zeus.
Geez, I'd change Tlingit there. Gunas geez gaat ik. Gunas geez, geet. Is age. Had gedekken Honolulu dag. Ka geek. Ach yes, kitje niek. Ka kleis plachus. Tlingit juk a tanke. A joe. It's just a fact. I'm still working. So I'm a student. I'm a master's student in linguistics at the University of Hawaii. I'm also Kakwaite, Deishitan from Shtakin Kwan, where there's a little branch of us living over in that area. I first took Tlingit classes with Shak Sanakik, Shirley Kendall, at the University of Alaska Anchorage, and I was inspired to go try and read what others had written about Tlingit in the literature, and discovered that I didn't understand it at all. So I said, well, I guess I've just got to go to school to learn it. So I'm in school to learn it. And then I discovered that my professors don't understand what they wrote either. So it's not just me. And that's a defect in what we have that I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to say a few things. I don't know, I might have too much to say, but you can always read the slides later and always ask me questions anytime. I'm going to talk about death, revitalization. I know that's not the word that some people like, but that's what all the academics use for the term. So I use what they say, whether I agree with it or not. Language documentation, that's a new field that we're working on in linguistics, and that's what I do. I'm going to give you a quick history of language documentation for Tlingit, because there's a lot more out there than you think. And then I'm going to talk about what we're missing. And finally, I'm going to say a few things about where we can go. So, first off is the worst part, so we can get that out of the way. There's a man named Tasako Tsunoda. He worked with a language in Australia, an Aboriginal language there, for years and years and years. And he has some amazing insights in his 2004 book, Language Endangerment and Language Revitalization. He has an entire chapter discussing what people define as language death. It's not as easy as what people seem to think. There's a lot of definitions. One of them is the cessation of language change. Every language changes all the time, nonstop. Parents are always complaining about their kids' language. It's a fact. Everywhere. Any language. Well, when that stops, maybe your language is dead. Maybe it's dying. Another issue is when the language stops being used in the community. That might be when a language dies, when nobody's talking in the store, in the restaurant, on the street. When it ceases to be transmitted, when it ceases to be given to children. That's, in my professional opinion, that's what I think language death means. We're not giving it to kids. The language is doomed. It will die if people do not put forth the effort to keep it alive. This is the sad one. A lot of people say the language dies when the native speakers die. It's pretty obvious. What about people who remember it? There's a lot of people out there. We get statistics like there are 250 Tlingit speakers on the earth, or sometimes there are 500 Tlingit speakers on the earth. Well, what about all those people that they understand it? They have a hard time speaking it, but they heard their mom and dad yelling at them all the time when they were kids in Tlingit. They sure know what a lot of that means. They can be encouraged to redevelop that. We can find a whole nother generation of speakers because they're rememberers. The death of second language speakers. If you stop having people learning the language, if your neighbors stop learning your language. There's a good example in Australia where a language was kept alive by a neighboring group who spoke the language as well. They spoke it as a second language, but it was good enough for everybody to figure out how it worked so they could bring it back alive in its home community. And finally, and this is an interesting one, what if the researchers, the linguists out there who work on the language, a lot of them become very fluent. Maybe they can be the last speaker sometimes. Leanne Hinton has done this. There's a lot of linguists in California who have done this. They become the last speakers and they go back to the community and help them relearn it. So, on to something a little more pleasant. Revitalization is actually pretty thoroughly researched. There's a lot of people working on it. Grenoble and Whaley have a good book about this. It's pretty accessible. It's not very academic. And they have a series of models for revitalization. The most obvious one is total immersion. I mean, that means when you have no choice. You speak the language and only that language, day in, day out. You wake up in it, you go to sleep in it. That's hard to do. language nests in Hawaii and in Israel and in New Zealand, they've been the most successful programs so far. They're the ones that work. They're proven. There's partial immersion, bilingual education camps that you go away to for a little while. But to be honest, I don't know how well these work. Foreign language teaching, you teach it like German or something, but honestly, how many people really speak a language that they learned in high school? It's pretty rare. Informal community learning, that's a lot more successful. Don't worry about the school, just do it at home. Do it in the restaurant. You don't need all of this structure to learn the language. Master Apprentice program, we've heard about that. Language reclamation or language revival, that means there's no speakers left. That means you're building it back from whatever some linguist or anthropologist wrote about it a century ago. We don't have to worry about that yet. So what models have we tried so far? Bilingual education is a complete flop. It's been going on since the 1970s, and how many people have come out of it who really speak? It's a waste of time. You ask linguists who work in language revitalization, bilingual education is teaching you English. It's not teaching you the native language. Bilingual education was designed to ensure that Spanish speakers learn some English so they get along in the United States real well. It has nothing to do with learning your native language. Don't even bother. Foreign language teaching. Well, like I said about high school, how many people remember their French or Spanish? Master Apprentice program. This is being pretty successful for us. We're getting people out there who really speak it now. We're getting kids who can say things, they can talk, they can come up with new sentences that they haven't learned, they haven't memorized. But there's others. Why haven't we tried total immersion? Why don't we do it? Why are people sitting back and saying, well, I'm waiting for somebody to implement this? Well, do it yourself. Child language immersion. This is the easiest thing to do of all. Put a baby next to a speaker and just have the speaker talk. They don't have to talk to the baby. But I'll tell you what, I've seen in person, I've seen a daughter who's growing up in the apartment next to me. She now speaks Japanese fluently along with her English. Why? Because mom speaks Japanese around her. That's all it takes. There's no teaching. She's never learned to read and write Japanese. She's only 3. But she speaks it just as well as an adult. I mean, she's talking, she's saying things to people who are passing by. She doesn't know which language she's supposed to use. She'll figure that out. There's no effort involved. Little kids just suck language up like a sponge. All you have to do is put them next to people who talk in it. Informal programs. Build up on this thing. You can do it outside of the home. You can do it in somebody else's home. That's an easier way of doing it. Play groups, having dinners together, getting family together, using the language. It's easy. It's really easy. You don't need funding. You don't need grants. You don't need politics or bureaucracy. Just do it. Money's always the major issue. I always hear this. I talk to people and they're always like, well, I don't know, we just couldn't get the grant, so we couldn't implement this, and then we couldn't get the tribe to provide us support and stuff. Our language costs us absolutely nothing to speak. We can use it and it's free. You don't need money to save a language. Time. Well, I don't have enough time. You could do language when you're doing other things. Do the dishes in your language. Hey, give me that plate. Put it to use every time. How do you say, I have to go to the bathroom? That's all it takes. Just keep saying it. People to speak with, and this is a real problem. I mean, there's not a lot of native speakers out there to talk with. And so I'm saying to the native speakers right now, you need to be willing to take people into your life. This Master Apprentice program sets aside a little bit of time, but really the most successful way to do it is to go live together. I know that sounds weird, but sometimes you need to adopt somebody into your family and just put them in your house and wake up with them and talk with them, argue about politics with them. Just do everything together all the time. It's hard. Native speakers I know you, so many of you, you're kind of elderly, you're feeling tired, but if you care, if you really want to, then take somebody young who's really eager, just take them right in and live with them, and live in the language with them. That's the best way to learn. Listening to recordings is not speaking practice. No one learns the language from just listening to tapes. In fact, children don't either. You always hear this stuff about, well, I'm going to play French speaking to them. I'm going to have them watch French TV. Little kids never learn a single word in the language from that. It doesn't work at all. Why? No interaction. You've got to interact in the language. There's got to be questions going back and forth. The child has to know that this is not some box that noise comes out of. They have to know that there are people behind the language, and children don't identify with people in that movie box. Well, I'm supposed to stop right here, but I don't know. It's lunch next, right? Do you want to stick around? Oh, there's another session after this. Okay, well, then I will say a few more things, just a few. Leanne Hitton made this point, and this is the point I really think matters the most to hammer home here, is that revitalization starts in the home and ends in the home. It does not happen in schools. It does not happen in formal institutions. It does not happen in the tribal government. It happens at home. This is a woman who has seen several languages in California that were dead. Their speakers had died 50 years ago, and she's seeing them being spoken by children and by parents in houses every day. There's no reason we can't do that too. There's absolutely no reason at all. School-based programs are the most difficult way to provide revitalization. They are absolutely the least successful. School-based programs, while they're good for building up a child's identity, they're good for giving them a sense of who they are and who they belong, kids don't learn anything from school language programs because they don't get enough immersion. They'll learn how to say their little introduction, and that's it. They don't know how to talk. You ask them, so what did you do yesterday? And they go, huh? They never learned that. Why? Because there's not enough time in school to teach them this. They got to do all these other things, and then they want to go play. No, don't waste your time in school. Spend the time with them at home. That's where language revitalization really happens. The only successful revitalization are childhood programs that have had extensive exposure at home. This is a fact. No other revitalization programs on the earth have ever worked unless they've happened at home. Right here, that's the ones that have succeeded. Hebrew, there's millions of speakers now. Maori, there's hundreds of thousands now. Hawaiian, well, there's several thousand now. Cornish has only got a few. Cornish is a little tiny language spoken on the far end of southern England, and now there's like 12 or 13 people who are native speakers of it. They started in the 70s at home. The school told them they could go take their language and shove it, so they did it at home, and it worked. Finally, I'll stop here. Home-based revitalization costs very little. It's another mouth around the house. That's about it. All it requires is enthusiasm, time, and effort. That's all you need. I'll stop. Stay away.
There might be a question while the next panel assembles up here. Keukne and Huayanak Aki Shawu. A question for Zeosh?
Good morning. And I work in a Department of Education. There are bilingual programs that exist across the state, and I would just respectfully ask if you're willing to look at what some schools really are doing with a lot of sincere effort. I know some kids in Ayaprun and Littlefield who are Eubank speakers, and yes, if they're blessed to have a speaker at home, their grandmas, their aunties, they get that total immersion. But I see the school district working with at least this one classroom. I know a principal and several teachers who put in such a big part of their day to do bilingual education, and I wanted to make sure that they're not forgotten. Their work is intense and sincere, and I think doing good. And it is actually bilingual education, so I just wouldn't want to
I don't want to offend anybody with my comments.
Oh,
I'm
it
trying to
wasn't
say
that I was
them first,
offended.
so I drive them home.
It's a learning opportunity, and I just wanted to just kind of be a little mouthpiece for them for a moment. Thank you.
No, I absolutely agree that actually it's essential. And what I should make clear is that bilingual programs and school-based programs really do a lot. It's not to discount them, but the main issue is a linguistic one. It just, without the exposure everywhere else, the language just doesn't stick. And bilingual education programs do an enormous amount for our children to teach them how much they're worth, that they're real people. They're they are people who matter, and that their language tells them that they matter. And it gives them something to grab onto, but it doesn't give them the fluency, and they won't get that fluency in school. I would say that I'm not telling programs to stop. They're essential for our identity and for our education, but they are not going to make fluent speakers. It's just a fact.
Okay, here's the big hook. Gunas chish, ha'a, deutsch, mahalo, karasakun, dogedin. Now we're going to have language project updates from some things that are happening in Juneau. So we have a panel of people here to talk to you.
Is this one working now? Okay. I guess Nora and I will start in since we're very low tech. I have a yellow piece of paper and I usually do it with a yellow pencil. And while Carrie is hooking up. And we've got a few things we just want to give you an update on. It won't take very long. And the first is that we've just finished our field test draft of intermediate Tlingit. It's a continuation of beginning Tlingit. It's available in a field test version from Sealaska Heritage Institute. It's not absolutely polished, and I'm still adding some readings for each lesson. But it's available on request, so it's not slick. It's not the kind of thing you'd buy in the bookstore. But if there are any of you that want to try and use it, you're certainly welcome to do this. And I guess you would contact Linda Bellardi or some of the folks at Sealaska. And eventually, after we go through one more tweakage of the making it look beautiful, we will put it out. I'll just say a couple of more things about this. Beginning Tlingit's been around for 35, 40 years now almost, and it's definitely a product of the 1950s and 1960s, but a lot of us did learn language this way. It's based on kind of a structuralist and pattern drill approach, but it has its limitations and it's dated, and intermediate Tlingit, again, is a follow-up. The big frustration with it is the whole method is based on prediction, and Tlingit is an impossible language to predict, so we were in a bind. So anyhow, it's there. It's got a lot of information that people are not going to get anywhere else, but we urge people to use it in conjunction with other methods, including the stuff that Carrie is going to be talking about with the reference grammars, and especially to use it in situations where people are actually speaking, like mentor-apprentice and some of the others. So that's there. Second thing that we're working on, some of you have seen these because we've been field testing them in our classes, is texts and glossaries. And this is something that's dear to my heart, is I really like the stories we've been working on, transcribing and translating, but then how to use these for introduction to Tlingit literature. And I've been taking advantage of our third-year students at University of Alaska Southeast in developing these stories. We have a lot of proofreaders, so this semester we've been working on a story by Catherine Mills. We're working on one now by Charlie Joseph, so it's great to have Ethel as a member of our class helping us. So I think it's just precious to me while we have people with us that have got this intimate relationship with the original storytellers that we work on that. So this was a spin-off from the intermediate Tlingit, was for each of the stories to have a glossary. A glossary is a limited dictionary based on what's in that story. So it has all of the words that are in the story, and you can do that. So my own experience as a student of German and Russian, where we had a lot of books like that, where you'd have a story by Pushkin or something, and then it would have the words in the back, and you could begin to work that through. So we've got 4 of these that are pretty well done, and we're working on some new ones. So eventually, as I say, that was a spin-off of Intermediate Tlingit, but it just got too complicated to put in there. So we'll try and eventually bring those to light, ideally in an interactive version. We're working with Jordan Latchler on trying to get an electronic interactive version. So we would have the Raven story, or in one case the mosquito story. We'd have illustrations, we'd have the sound, we'd have the text in Tlingit, the text in English, and then you could click on one of the words you didn't know and look it up. So that's in the works. What we've been doing last semester and this semester in our course, TPRS, which stands for Teaching Proficiency Through Reading and Storytelling. And in its original form that many of you are probably already familiar with, you make up a simple story, and then you have questions like yes-no questions, and then these what we call WH questions: who, what, where, when, why, how. So what's exciting with what we're doing is I wanted to try this with a traditional unedited Tlingit story. So we're dealing with Catherine Mills' Raven, the King Salmon, and the Small Birds. And it's been interesting because like Roby, I'm having Helen Keller moments about 5 times per class as we're trying to figure out how to ask a simple question like, what is he doing? And Nora and Ethel and Irene and our speakers say, no, that's not the way you say it. And so it can be frustrating, but it's exciting because we're taking a story. So we have like ravens walking along the beach. And then your first question, is Raven walking along the beach? Yes. Is he swimming? No. What's he doing? He's walking along the beach. Who's walking along the beach? Raven's walking along the beach. Hopefully this will eventually get us into a slightly more sophisticated level about talking about stories. But that's what we do in English literature. And we read Huckleberry Finn and we talk about what's the significance of this. Well, we can do the same thing. So that's been kind of exciting to try and take that method. We do have our complete first draft. We still need to proofread a little bit. And if any of you are dying to see it, email me and we'll send you a copy as soon as it gets a few of the warts and pimples off it and we have it a little more polished. Finally, what we've been doing over the last years is Nora has 40 years worth of tapes, and I'll let her talk a little bit, and also maybe Alice and Carrie, because I'm the least involved in this. We're basically transferring her audio cassette tape collection and some of our old reel-to-reels to CDs. So I'll pass this over to Nora. We've done this under 2 grants, one originally through See Alaska that Carrie wrote and was directing, and then the other through Alice. And all I do is carry tapes from one place to another.
When I got turned on to Tlingit, I'm a Tlingit myself. Tlingit einach yuchatang k'dain an kechadodutziwat Tlingit yuchatangi. Aya shukanach ada tanachtatan ya Tlingit yuchatangi. Ade ha anak yanasyakia. Aga aya akake aya swanton yudo asago khatu kashidi khositin khwatu Tlingit enaka kaushihit jaan khwatu wislitzi khonach wislitzi wanga nains khatnashkacht. It would bring myself to almost crying to read it. And then I read Boaz. Boaz yito asago ka. Tlingit enaka kaushihit wayukatang. Weswantan tsuhasa kaushihit. Tlingit enach. Na tle aka hasa kaushihitiya. Shukanakia Century Start Clock, Satishak Dewe, when did Swanton write this?
1904.
1904. Shugu, ya, Kek Handed Tak, ya Hanakuti Yakle, 1904. Akao Akao Shikit, where Tlingit Yukatange. Konnachtagag Sitsikwa Atu, Kayat Atawa Adayakti Teltach Stakatu Jitu to Tia Tlingit Ade has Ushtin as a Kashiti has Ushtin as a Takuya Ya Tlingit Enach Shkatnik is Teltak Eden has to Jitu to Tea. Aya a Kawishit Aya a Kassatina Yaktoati Wasa Ushke Yotoata Stakatia Yo Ya Shkatnik Ako Achashu a Kawa a Jawa Atu Kakwa Kancha Akowat where Dr. Krausich Teen had Kauduanik. Our Hakankowatin college Hagutku. When I was going to college, Dr. Kraus heard that I could write Tlingit. And he came down to see at an anthropology meeting. It was a party. And he tested me all kinds of ways to see if I knew the symbols, especially the X's, the all those. And then he got a grant to get Alaska Native languages in an archive. I think he had another wish to start it, but it didn't pan out, so he's got an archive now. That's why he wanted us, Dick and I, to go down to Southeast Alaska and see if we could tape the people that knew the stories. It was a scary thing for me because my family told me you always respect other people. And I was so afraid to say anything to the relatives that I knew that knew stories. I was afraid because it was another position that I was going to ask them from. So some of them were very generous, most of them really, and helped me. And once I got to the first person, they knew each other. My father told me to go and see Kassatka. Go see Charlie Joseph, he's the one that really knows. But you know, I chickened out. I didn't know Kassatka. I didn't know who it was. And when I found out, he was so powerful to me. I first saw him in a ceremony. He was carrying a drum and he was singing. He was so great. I just tingled all over to hear him. And that's when I chickened out. How can I approach him? But later on, I was approached to help do film with him. So that's how everything started to roll, and we got into a lot of things. Andy Hope was the instigator for most of them. And come to mention Andy Hope, when I was working on the Tlingit that I gathered in the field, he would come and watch me while I was transcribing. He would sit right there, and I had a desk over here, and my bed was over there, and watch. He got inspired, but he couldn't speak Tlingit. So he did the best thing he could. He started conferences, and this is one of them. And that's how we continue to go. And right now, I'm digitizing, or is it digitizing? Digitizing the tapes that I gathered from that time on. It's wonderful to get these tapes, but I don't have the time to work with all of them. I try to transcribe and translate some of the guys that I really respected. Charlie is one of them. And Zuboff, Robert Zuboff, great storyteller. He was a very generous storyteller. He told stories to a lot of people. And so it was all right to keep on going. George Davis, David Kadashan, all of those men who were wonderful. My father, all of those guys, they had knowledge that no one else had. And they told me. And they never reproached me or anything like that. Sometimes they just kind of, yeah, you know, small, yeah, it means maybe, maybe no. So I just left them alone. So this is, I'm thankful that this all happened. Maybe some young man will come along, maybe a young lady will come along and get inspired to work on Tlingit. And in that way, maybe we can finish doing what I started. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to end. Thank you.
Gunnar Cheese. Maybe there won't be any end.
Two things. I forgot to mention our next project, which is the Raven Stories, so stay tuned for that. And also what Nora's doing now is have they've been made on CD, the project that Alice is directing with called Metadata, where you actually listen to the tapes or the CDs and make an index of what's on them so that people will be able to locate things and work with them in the future.
Can you tell we have too much to tell and not enough time? Okay. 5 minutes, and here's some more exciting stuff.
Carrie Edwards, Yuchatu Asauk, Achlinket Sayi Kua Akishawu, where Ganach Tedi Chawe, Sa Achjit Hasawati, Deshuk Kechat Uawat. I'm just going to take 5 minutes to talk about a couple of the language projects I've been working on over the past few years, starting with a Tlingit dictionary. This dictionary is going to be available in print. This is one of the proofs, not quite printed yet, but it's getting there. It will also be available in CD-ROM and online formats. So today I'm just going to show you the online format. Okay, before I talk about the dictionary too much, I would just like to state that it was funded by the Administration for Native Americans through the Sealaska Heritage Institute, and several elders helped me with this project. So let's just look at the credits page first. I've been working consistently with a group of elders for the past 3 years, and if any of you are here, could you raise your hand or stand up so people can recognize you? Anita Lafferty, John Marks, June Pegues, and Helen Sarabia. Those are the people who have contributed to the content of the dictionary. Also, there's about 1,500 example sentences in the dictionary, and those were provided by Bessie Cooley of Teslin, David Katzik, and Fred White. And these are the voices that you'll hear recorded on the dictionary also. Okay, so let's just take a really quick look at how the online portion works. So you can search for a word in English or Tlingit. So let's start by looking up an English word. So I searched for the word house, and 20 entries came up that include the word house. So let's look at the first one. So the entry here is Atkan Hidi, and we'll listen to it pronounced by an elder. Can people hear that in the back? It's kind of quiet. Oh. Perfect. Okay, so in a noun entry like this, we have the Tlingit word with an English translation. There's also variants, so this word in Carcross would be pronounced Etkan Hidi. We also have example sentences and audio for each of the example sentences, so I'll just play a few of those and you can listen.
Atkan Hidi Tledushu Kakus Katakun City.
Achlisko hasji yesewe wudutliach we atkan hidi klein.
Wehin chak awe atkan hidi au liach. Kadukli atkan hidi de ye awsine.
وأتقان هتي أو أخشيا وتي وخات.
Lots of familiar voices. Let's just look up a Tlingit word quickly. We'll look up the word hoots.
Hoots.
Okay, and again, example sentences with accompanying audio, so you can read along.
Hoots ten wa awa chakwa.
Hoots was iti au sitin wa kike a. Wechjana ati watich hoots etjana gut.
Ayayik ge ia ach we hoots hinjach de.
Okay, another way you can look up a word is by browsing the headwords. And this is just going to list all of the words in the dictionary in alphabetical order. So one thing I should note here is this site is still under construction. It's not actually public yet. But at the end, I'm going to give you the website so you can use it anyway. So here's all the words in the dictionary. There's 2,872 words. The verbs right now are listed alphabetically by the first letter in the first word, but that's actually going to change. So a word like adachwugut will eventually be alphabetized by stem, which is gut, so that'll be found under G. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up because we don't have much time here. One other project I wanted to mention is a verb book that I'm working on. And just really briefly, the history of this project is Dick and Nora started this project maybe 30, 20?
Probably 10 or 15 years ago.
Okay, 10 or 15 years ago. And they so generously gave me the data that they started with and
we pooped out.
gave me the torch on this project. The goal of this project is to have 500 conjugated Tlingit verbs in a book, something like this. If any of you have ever seen the 501 Spanish verb book, it basically gives you a verb with every tense and aspect for every subject for 501 verbs. So that's our goal. Right now, we have about 400, so we're hoping to have 500 by the end of our year. This project was funded by National Science Foundation through Sea Alaska and also by ANA through Gold Belt. And a couple of the elders I'm working with, in addition to those already mentioned, for this project are Lillian Austin and Irene Cadiente. And Dion Cadiente is also a big support to this project. Just quickly, here's what one verb looks like in my database. This is the verb to cook it, to cook something. So I'm collecting the forms for the imperative form. Oh, I see. I can't do anything about that, I'm sorry. So we have the imperative do it, the cook it form, don't cook it, I'm cooking it, you're cooking it, she's cooking it, etc. The perfective, I cooked it, she cooked it. The future, will cook it, won't cook it. The hortative, let me cook it, let him cook it. The perfective habitual, she cooks it every time. The negative perfective habitual, she hasn't cooked it yet. She can't cook it, she would have cooked it if she cooks it, etc. So there's 12 of these forms that we're collecting for each verb, and I have to say that the patience the elders have in producing this data is amazing. I think I drive them nuts, but they're really wonderful to work with. And so look for this project. It should be done in about a year. And in the meantime, I'm emailing out the verbs that I collect. James Crippen is going to help us get this data into a shareable format online so that you can access these verbs from the website whenever you want. This is how you access the online dictionary. Just know that it's not quite finished. We're going to be altering it somewhat, but this is how you get on. So if you want to write down the address. For username and password, you just type in guest in both fields. And if you want to receive the emails I send out about every week or so that include Tlingit phrases and verbs, just send me an email at my email address down here, and I will include you on my list. I'd also, just in closing, I'd like to say that I just feel really honored to do this work. And I've been so warmly welcomed and accepted by the Tlingit community. It's just been a really incredible experience doing this work and getting to know the elders. And to sit here with Dick and Nora, who I've admired for many years as a student, I just want to say that. Guna Chish, Yuhan.
People are doing such fine work. Some people will want to stay now for just a little bit more and be able to collect some DVDs. Other people will be wanting to move on towards lunch, so we understand. I want to now talk a little bit more about one more project. I'm going to switch this stuff out here. So would somebody like to lead some TPR? I would like to announce that Dick and I received funding from the National Science Foundation for the second project to record birth speakers having conversations in Tlingit. We've got a 3-year project. We're hiring young people to go around with the good video cameras, get people to talk together about whatever they want to talk about, unscripted. There are requests for different topics that people would like to have conversations documented in. Why? Why do we want conversations? Because we need a record of the conversations for people to be able to hear and to learn from and to study. We need to have opportunity for people to get sufficient exposure to the language. So this project will be going on to 2012. The speakers will be recorded. Hopefully they'll be doing something, so their attention will be engaged on some quiet activity like working with wool here. In our pilot project, we have recorded 6 conversations, and up here I have DVDs of the raw recording without any writing on it, just for people to maybe put into your DVD player and play like it's music. I have gotten this idea of, you know how we work so hard and we study the language. We listen hard and we read and we write, and it's hard work. Somewhere the idea came to me, what about if the language studies you? So once in a while we can lighten up and we can just let the sounds of the language flow behind us and enter the bloodstream. Here's a list of things that people have requested to be recorded. I hope that you will give us more ideas of things that you would like recorded. Up here, there are some papers to, and perhaps you would pass them around. Who to get hold of. If you want to be recorded, you know somebody that should be recorded, or you have ideas about what to record. Singing songs at a party, humor, place names, clans, at-oo, falling in love, ooh, playing paper dolls, Nora and her exercise group, sewing and weaving, introduce your cousin, talking to babies, talking about babies. After the recording, a younger person sits with the elder speaker and writes in both languages what was said, so that at the end result, we'll have the writing to go along with the seeing and the hearing. And not only are we working with the electrons in the recording and the software and the hardware, but the electrons in the brain, as the elders are having this opportunity to be recorded, it's a forum for their language use. The younger people are able to focus on with their elders as they're transcribing and translation this recording. They each know what the other knows in relation to this recording. The younger person can keep going back and listening to that recording and learning the language there because it's their recording and they know where to find that information. They're building the neurons in their body to access the language. So here's a shot from one recording. This is number 1 up here. And when you take these recordings, these DVDs, they say on them, please copy and share. So if you don't get one, keep your eyes peeled for who did get one and ask them to copy it. How long do we have? This says a number, but think for yourself, how long do we have to record birth speakers? Maybe forever, because we'll get new birth speakers, because we're working in the families.